Okay, so welcome back to the Practical Tanya. We are up to chapter 7, and I have to tell you, in preparing for this class, it's like, for me, it's like learning the Chumash again. There's so many concepts that are here. Every time you learn the Parsha, we read it over, you're supposed to get something new from it, because it really is a lot to get from it, that you can get a new thing every year in a lifetime and beyond. I'm really getting a lot out of preparing for this class. I wish I had another 20 hours to prepare for it, because there's a lot of key questions about life and contextualizing things we encounter and experiences. So I felt very much so in this reviewing chapter 7 and 8. We're actually going to do 7 and 8 together this week, because 8 is kind of small and it flows. It's really like it flows over from 7. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give you a quick review of. All right. So here we are, the Practical Tanya, chapter 6 review. Very quickly. Chapter 6 gets into the serious, where Tanya gets serious. So someone's trying to get in. Oh, the volume is low. Okay. I'm not sure. Is that better? Lee, you want to just comment on that? Is it better? So I could take the headset off. I don't mind. Maybe I'll take.
How's that?
I can hear you fine.
Is that better, Lee?
It's just as good, about the same for me.
Just as good as them? Okay, it's good. It's better for Lee, so it's good for me also. I'm not having, pilot gear on me. Headset, someone's saying headset better. All right, Lee, I'm going to try to speak louder, but I hope you can hear well, because someone's saying it's better. We're having.
Well, I will go for it. I'll put the mic. All right. I hope this is clear for everybody. In the spirit of trying a process improvement, please mute yourself, or I can do that. But if you can do it yourself, it's good for now, if you didn't do it already. All right. So in chapter 6, Tanya got very serious. We were talking about the animal soul. And we described it as really the mirror image. I think that's the right description. It has everything. It is all the structure, the complexity of the divine soul. It has emotions. It's comprised of emotions, 7 to be exact, 7 primal emotions, 3 modes of intellect, 10 faculties in total. And then it talks about, it has 3 modes of expression. One interesting point is the Alter Rebbe describes the emotions. In describing the constitution of the animal soul, i.e. your animal drive, your self-perpetuation drive, he lists the emotions first and the intellect second. Even though you cannot have emotions before you have knowledge about the stuff you're having emotions for. If I don't know about ice cream, I cannot desire ice cream. It's just, you have to know it. You have to know how you interact with it to have that love or, repulsion from something you don't like, or that fear from something you're afraid of. But we pointed out the reason he lists emotions first is because that's really the kishkis of the animal soul. Emotions being very subjective, are a better base for the animal soul, for feeling of self-perpetuation, than the intellect. The intellect is more cool. It tends to be more objective. Now, in the animal soul's world, it does have intellect. Because it has to know about stuff, it has to think about stuff, to desire it, or at least consider how that stuff makes it feel, right? But it's only a means to the emotions, the feelings, the feeling of self. Also, we said the concept of the intellect is a lot about after the fact that you want something, you know it, you want it, is a lot of rationalization. Again, these are all just showing how the animal soul is a drive, albeit a complex drive of self-perpetuation and pleasure. The three modes of expression, and this is important because we're going to pick off from this, is any thought, speech, and action that is executing self-gratification and even self-fulfillment. Now, I want to stop the share for a moment. I'm also going to spotlight my video. Alrighty. Now, what's really interesting is the Tanya in chapter 6 made a radical statement. It didn't just say that all good comes from the godly soul and all bad comes to the animal soul. It didn't allow us to get off the hook that simplistic. It said all holiness is driven by the drive of your divine soul, and all unholiness is driven by your animal soul. Unholiness is not limited to just like bad or mean stuff. How does Tanya define it? I didn't put this in a slide, but it said, let me just grab the book. It said, anything in thought, speech, and action that is not directed towards God or the service of God or higher purpose, or connecting yourself and your stuff to higher purpose, to God's purpose. Anything, any action, any speech, any thought that is not to that aim is unholiness. And that, my friends, is a radical statement. Because it's not just saying when you do something bad, it's animalistic or animal soul driven. It could be many actions that we do that are healthy, that are harmless, and even they're good. They're pleasant behavior between people, let's say. But as it very succinctly declared, if any of those actions, speech, and thought are not directed towards God or the service, the divine purpose, it is driven by unholiness. And it's a very radical statement, because a person could be playing a sport, exercising, eating, all in a kosher way, in a permissible way. And we're saying that it can be driven by the animal soul, by unholiness. So we have to clarify before we go on a little bit of chapter 6. And I'm going to hopefully cover a little of chapter 6 and the whole 7 and 8, at least in summary form. Just going to mute all. So we defined in Tanya that the divine soul wants to connect to its divine source. Now, everything has divine source, God is the creator of the world. God created, as we say in Genesis and Bereshit, God said, let there be light, let there be a firmament, let there be this. All that metaphorical divine speech is divine energy that animates all of creation. So every creation in this world, the way the Torah describes it, came from a divine word, a divine energy, a divine creative process. It used speech as the metaphor. That means anything you're going to see in this world has a divine spark, has a divine energy. Everything. But where's God? If God is in everything, then everything should be holy and good. Why is there good, bad, ugly, good, bad, and neutral? And the answer is because God created the world. We spoke about a very Kabbalistic term called tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means contraction, how God is everywhere, infinite, all over, and yet God contracted himself, hid himself. A lot of Kabbalah on this, take the word for the general idea. To make room for other stuff. And God hid himself. And it's not literal, but it's not literal, so let's leave it there. All that layer where God hides himself, God's hiding himself through a layer. We see every descent of divine energy into this world, into the lower world, and lower, till we get to a physical, crass world that hides the physicality naturally hides on a divine source. It's not like a flashlight that you see the beam is coming from the flashlight. Although we're really the same thing. We're energy flowing from God, we just don't see it. And that's because that energy is going through many layers, many veils. And each veil hides, obscures God's presence. So in chapter 6, it's transitioning from the microcosm to the macrocosm. Till now, we talked about, okay, you have a divine soul, utter selflessness and connecting to God, the infinite, the harmony of every creation. When you connect to that, you're connected to everything, interconnectivity, eternal. And that's when you connect to God through mitzvahs. The animal soul is selfish. So within yourself, stay away from selfish and, aspire to more and more selflessness. That's in the person. And we said anytime you have an urge of selfishness, animal soul, selflessness, divine. But in the end of chapter 6 and into 7 and 8, it actually it tries to explain the mechanics of this. And along the way, it clarifies that what we might even think is coming from a pleasant, good place, while it might be pleasant and might not be bad, we cannot call it divine. And that's why it makes the radical statement in 6 that we're going to sort of explain a little bit in tonight's class, that anything that is not directed towards God or the service of God, of higher purpose, is stemming from the animal soul, and therefore it is stemming from various shades of gray, unholiness. You'll see there's various shades of gray of what that means, of unholiness. It doesn't always mean bad. Before we get into the end of 6, Tanya, albeit it's a Hasidic philosophy book, it pulls a lot from Kabbalah. It pulls a lot from Kabbalah. Kabbalistic is a lot more cryptic and esoteric, but it will utilize a lot of terms from Kabbalah. And it says this idea of unholiness, of being anything that's not connecting to the divine or not being a vehicle to connect to the divine, is called in Aramaic Sitra Achra. Sitra Achra literally translates as the other side. The moniker that the Kabbalists called the forces of unholiness, they gave it a couple names. We're going to talk about two tonight. And the first one is the other side. Why other side? I mean, maybe you should have called it like, Gary Larson, the far side. Sounds more scary. Why the other side? And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya says it's exactly this point. This radical point that we have to clarify, that anything that is not becoming a vehicle for God, whether through emotional connectivity, whether through mitzvah actions, whether through speech, Torah, knowledge, divine knowledge, if it's not connecting to that, you're not making yourself a vehicle through those expressions, it's other. It's other than that. It's the other side. It's unholy. That's why they called unholiness the other side, to point in that in this, and we spoke a little bit last week, that in Kabbalah and in Tanya, there's no neutral. There's no such thing as neutral ground. There's either unholiness, there's only holiness, that which is a vehicle to God or God's will, and everything else, which is various shades of gray of not being a vehicle, whether temporary or permanent or very long time, not being a vehicle towards godliness. That explains why the Kabbalists, when they refer to the forces of negativity, which of course also comes from God, but it's that veil where God obscures his goodness and oneness and interconnectivity. So that veil is the source of all negativity. It's called, one of the names is called the other side. It's other than seeing and feeling connected to God. We still have to qualify this, because it's a very radical thing to say that anything that you're eating a balanced meal, but you're not doing it for God or higher purpose. Is that bad? Is that not bad? Is it unholy? We'll see that you're eating a balanced kosher meal. I know we think I mentioned like deli is a mitzvah, but not necessarily is a mitzvah. It can go either way. It's the potential for holiness, or it could be the potential for unholiness. Before I continue, I would like to take some questions on anything I just said.
What about these unkosher animals?
We'll get there soon.
Huh?
We'll get there soon. We're going to talk about that very soon.
Okay.
All right. So now that we talked about, but till now, again, we were talking the microcosm. In you, you have a choice of selfishness, of animal soul expression, or godly soul expression. We thought it was kind of simple. Selfish, animal, selflessness, godly. But now we have to get a little more nuanced, a little deeper. I'm going to introduce you to share the screen again. Only because I think that helps to have a screen. Okay. All right. So, in the prophet Yecheskel, Ezekiel, in a prophecy after he was in exile, after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, it's a famous prophecy of Ezekiel. He mentions the following: Ve'era v'hine ruach sa'ara ba min hatzafei, anan gadol v'eish mislakachas v'negeloi saviv, v'mitocha kein hachashmal mitechesh. I looked, and lo, a stormy wind came sweeping out of the north, a huge cloud and flashing fire, surrounded by a radiance. And in the center of it, in the center of the fire, a gleam as of amber. So the simple meaning, Rashi explains, is talking, he saw the destruction coming out of, the Babylonians were coming out of the north of Israel, and they descended into Israel and destroyed the temple. But he saw a radiance, a gleam of hope. Ultimately, they'll come back. But the Alter Rebbe, according from the Kabbalists, points out here there's destruction of 3 stormy clouds: a stormy wind, a huge cloud, and flashing fire. And then there's a radiance. That's all that's relevant from this verse to you here tonight. The first 3, in Kabbalistic terms, are called the 3 impure klipos. They are, I'll get into the forbidden pleasures later, but he was describing the prophet Ezekiel 3 forces. He gave 3, it's metaphorical. We go back. A stormy wind, a huge cloud, flashing fire. This is, like any prophecy, is a depiction of physical things that's referring to spiritual prophecy. It's just a parable. But it gives us an idea that these are 3 whirlwinds of destruction, whirlwinds of negativity, of negative forces. And then there's a 4th, vinoga, a radiance. It's coming from this forces of negativity, but it still has a glimmer of light, of radiance. In the end of chapter 6, he started talking about how those 3, we call it 3 klipos. I'd like to talk a little bit about the term klipos before I go further about the impure klipos. Klipah, anybody know a little Hebrew?
A little bit.
Does anybody know what the word klipah means in Hebrew? Contemporary Hebrew?
It means a peel.
A peel, thank you.
Peel. And you're that brief.
Very good. Nice. Yael, welcome. It seems like you're a new.
Hello.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
I couldn't hear what the word was. Appeal? Is that?
A peel.
Peel like an
P-E-E-L.
orange peel.
Oh, peel.
Orange
Uh-huh.
peel.
Peel. Uh-huh.
Okay, very good. So that's the second term that the Kabbalists, when they refer to that veil of unholiness, right? Everything comes from God, but the filter, the negative filter that God's energy comes through and that gives rise or source for negativity in this world is called, number 1, we said, is Sitra Achra, other side, because it's other. It's not obviously surrendered and flowing of God's goodness. It hides on it, so it's at some level, it's other. And the second term they use is klipa, a peel, a shell. Because, as follows, everything in this world, as I mentioned, it says in the Torah, not by bread alone does man live, but by the word of God. And in Kabbalah, the way it's explained is that why does food give you life? Is it because of the physical chemistry of it? Is it because of the physical chemistry? And the answer is, of course, physically that's the reason, but why is that so? Why does this these elements together give energy and sustenance? And that's because there's a spiritual energy, the word of God. As I mentioned before, everything has the word of God in it, animating it. And from that becomes the ability to have a creation that continues to exist. And let's say by food, bread, give you life. because it's not because of the bread, it's because of the godly energy inside the bread. Everything has godly energy. Everything. The question is, though, how trapped is that energy? Or how veiled is that energy? Because we said the only fact that there's negativity or any type of obscurity of God is because God makes this veil that he goes through. Everything comes from this veil. The question is how dark, how dim. You know, you can dim the bright screen. I should really do that for sound effect to show you my screen going bright. We have enough problems with Zoom. I'm not going to take risks. But imagine my screen. I'm taking my phone out, and I want to have battery save mode, so it dims it a little bit. Or you dim it all the way. Or you make it very bright. It's the same phone. It's the same home screen, but you chose how much of it is going to be allowed to be seen by your eye. Kelipah is pointing to the concept. Everything in the world has a veil over it. The question is how dim that veil is. The veil that's covering over the godly purpose and energy and usability of that divine spark, that divine word that allows this creation to continue to exist and be utilized and exist for us and for everything. So Kelipah, everything's got a peel, everything's got a husk. There's some types of things that the husk or the peel is totally opaque. Like let's take a nut, a walnut, a chestnut. The shell totally covers over the nut. Even in fruit, most fruits that I can think of, an orange might be edible, you know, the peel of the orange, you can eat some of the peel, but it hides over the seed. Meaning the seed, let's say the seed, the source of that fruit. I don't know if it's the source at this point, but is hidden. The core of it is hidden. Its essence is hidden by the shell. It's there. The essence is there. The seed is there. But the shell hides on it. That is a metaphor for things in this word that we say are forbidden pleasures. And God said, you know, for Jewish people, these things are not kosher. Be it food, be it certain activity, be it certain relationships. It's not kosher. It's not why. Everything comes from God. What's why this, why not that? So God's telling us these things, for whatever reason, in the cosmos, God decided these things are going to have a shell that you cannot interact with directly to unleash that energy, absorb it, and release it back in the world. So example, a pig. I loved, Charlotte's Web. Wilbur, cute, very cute. Pigs are very cute. There's nothing against pigs. I went to a Hebrew school student that got very offended that pigs weren't kosher. They really liked pigs were their favorite animal. When the Torah says don't eat pig, it's telling you, it's not because God wants to deprive you. Many great chefs will say, oh, kosher, you're missing out on the finest cuisine. I don't know. I'll take their word. They're more educated culinarily. It's telling you that food has a shell that prevents you from taking its energy, its essence, absorbing it into you, and utilizing it for godly activity, to fuel your godly activity. It's just, the Torah is, it's not trying to deprive you and say, okay, you know, the Jews, you have to have a tighter whip or yoke on you. Just saying that this, the spiritual energy of this is just, it's not meant for you to utilize for this activity. You're not going to utilize it in God's will and thereby connect it to infinity or connect it to its divine purpose. It's not going to help you connect to your divine purpose, and you're not going to connect it to its divine purpose. Like a pig for eating. Now, it's interesting. It doesn't mean that that stuff is like condemned and it's like, you know, the devil. It just means you can't do what it says you can't do with it. You could do other stuff with it. For example, you can utilize the leather of a pig for, I don't know, furniture or whatever people use it for, pig skin.
Quick question.
You can also, and that actually that's an acceptable use, and you're elevating it. You're using it for nothing against God's will. You're using it for a good purpose. Maybe you'll even make some nice, a nice chair cover in the synagogue with it. It's not a mitzvah to have a chair cover, but it's beautifying the synagogue. Like, certain types of leathers that don't come from kosher animals. They can be utilized for acceptable and even, accessories to mitzvahs things. But in eating it, you would not be utilizing its energy for a divine purpose, because that's going against, because God's saying this is not God's will. The veil of it is too opaque, and you're not going to extract the energy and bring it higher. The way you do actually elevate a pig's energy is one of two things. Either we say using it for other purposes or staying away from it. So many times choosing to not get involved in something because God said so, like eating pig, is also a form of a mitzvah. It's exercising a negative mitzvah. You're not doing something wrong. And you're actually, what's relevant to the creature in the macrocosm, it's not just, oh, you're a good boy, you're a good girl, you didn't, go against God. You're actually elevating the energy of that creature by not utilizing it because God said so. And the reason God, and it's not arbitrary, the point here is another thing is, says God just said this, look, I want to test you. We're in a relationship. I don't need anything. I'm all powerful and infinite. I don't really need anything. But I want to see. I want to see if you really love me. So I'm going to make some red lines. Don't go to those red lines. But I'm all powerful. Nothing makes a difference to me. I'll just don't eat pig. Don't wear wool and linen together. So it's just like, God's like depriving us to sort of show us we can prove we love him and we want to connect. Or God's actually giving you a glimpse into the user manual of the spiritual energy of creation and saying that this, for a Jew, because someone who's not Jewish is actually allowed to eat not kosher food, not because not kosher food is not bad. It's a question of, can it be utilized for in the Torah purpose for a mitzvah, or can its energy be repurposed within a Jewish person? But that's sort of the idea of when God says, stay away from this not kosher stuff, he's saying, this is just not your thing. It's like going to a school guidance counselor, who really is, let's say it's the world's best, guidance counselor who really can pick up an aptitude test what your talents are. And they're saying, look, I read your tests. You'd be a fantastic artist. He says, no, you're creative, you're out of the box. says, no, I'm sorry. I know you're the world's greatest psychologist, guidance counselor. I want to be an accountant. That's the reverse job description that was described. It's not a matter. It's God's this like guidance counselor telling us this is just not going to help you get closer to your ultimate purpose. What is ultimate purpose? As you said, we mentioned it before. The ultimate purpose is you're taking everything in this world and elevating it to its divine purpose, which means you're connecting it to its infinite interconnectedness with everything else, because you're connected to God's will. There's a certain interconnectivity with everything. And it's eternal nature versus temporal. So God's saying, this for you, it's not going to do that, this food or this activity. It just stay away from it. It's not going to, it's my creation. I love it. It's wonderful. For you to eat it is not going to help it or you further this divine transformation that God put us here for. Okay. Back to the sharing screen. And that's why all forbidden pleasures in the macrocosm, meaning in this source, in that macrocosmic filter that God puts in between his oneness and stuff, is one of them is called the three impure klipos. The three, why it's three, it's taken from that verse. So I'm not sure the difference in each one, but they're grouped together anyway. It's just a category. The klipos that are impure, they're obscure. So the question now goes, and that for in the Torah is telling us for a Jewish person that anything that the Torah is saying is a sin. It's not just because God wants to be a control freak. God's telling you, you will not further your ultimate divine transformational purpose through utilization of those things. And that means those things, animals, activity, relationships that are forbidden, that because going back, they're not going to further that, again, that term we said before, bittul, that divine transformational surrender. They're not going to do that. They're not meant, that's not their function in this world to do that for you. Because everything, the way that Tanya talks about good means being a vehicle for God. That's not good. Holy means a person, a thing, an experience is a vehicle for God, a vehicle for God's will or God's presence or God's revelation. At the greatest, a prophet would be like that. That is holy. And that's our divine soul wants us to be holy. It wants everything we do to be a vehicle for that. Anything that doesn't is other. And sometimes not just other, it's not able to be a vehicle in a direct way. In an indirect way, it is a vehicle. By you, as I said, by you staying away from certain things, you're actually transforming them as well. That's also an effect. So then there is, in chapter 7, it talks about, is everything either forbidden or holy? Is everything forbidden or holy? It says no. There is a third category, and that was if you go back to this verse, the Kabbalah talks, the surrounded by radiance, right? Surrounded by radiance. In Hebrew, v'noga lo saviv, v'noga, there's a radiance. Meaning this is the winds of impurity, of negativity, that, again, that veil that covers over God, the forces of negativity. But there's also a radiant version of that. There's a 2.0. That radiant version in Hebrew is called klipas noga. It's klipa, it's a veil. It's not pure surrendering holiness to God's, of being a vehicle to God's holiness. It is a detachment. It's a veil, but it's a radiant one. It's one where the divine spark is more accessible. Hands reach away. I'm going to tell you a really incredible teaching of next week's Torah portion that really brings us to understand what it means, a radiant obscurity, a radiant shell, a radiant filter on God's presence. Stop share. So for those of you that are familiar with the story, next week's Torah portion, Shlach, the very famous story of the spies. The Jews are about to go into the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. By the way, just a sound check. Am I still clear? You can type or unmute yourself in the chat box. We're good? Okay. Thank you for the thumbs up. Okay. So Moses sends the spies, and they're supposed to just say, what's the land like and how can we conquer it? That's all they're supposed to do. We know they come back and they say, it's such a formidable enemy, giants, scary giants, fierce warriors, and we cannot, it's a beautiful land, but we cannot go up. And they scare the Jews rebel against Moshe and say, we don't want to go up. And because of that, God says, okay, the ultimate punishment is you're not going up for 40 years. You're going to die out in the desert and the next generation will go up. Hasidic teachings explain, that what was really going on was an ideological transition between the Jews' existence in the desert and what their motive being would be in going to Israel. In the desert, they were totally submerged in God's oneness. In God's, all their needs were met: food, the manna, well of Miriam for water, the cloud of glory for, the cloud of glory. To protect them from the elements. Their clothes, we'd say their clothes grew with them. It was a miraculous time. And they were literally studying Torah and learning about Judaism the whole time. And then they were going to Israel, that type of sort of miraculous existence, with God providing everything, was going to stop. And they were going to have to fend for themselves. They're going to have to live by the laws of nature and set up a society based on the laws of Torah. But it's going to be hard because they're going to be busy with the physical world most of the day. So the spies, who were the creme de la creme of the righteous people, the Jews, they say, you know what? This cannot work. This is the inside story. This cannot work. We can't go up to Israel and succeed in this sort of like go to work, deal, with mundane stuff most of the time, and still feel connected to our spiritual source. What's going to happen is we're going to be like the Jews, the people in Israel, where they become corrupted. We're going to get corrupted. So we don't want to go to Israel. We want to stay in the desert in God's embrace. And that was the ideological mistake they made. We know that was wrong because although they had reason to be scared, it's not correct because that's the whole purpose of this world. We're supposed to interact with the world. In spite of the temptation, in spite of the challenge, we still do mitzvahs. We still retain spirituality amidst a very mundane physical sort of, life of providing for our needs. So it's interesting. Before they go up, it says that it was the time of the grape harvest. Interesting detail. And why is it mentioning that? So the Rebbe taught a beautiful, incredible lesson. From that, you think some of the details of the Torah are so random and so whatever, small extra info, but he says in that actually was a powerful message to the spies. Moshe knew about this ideological challenge of going into the world, working with the world and transforming it and staying true to your spiritual roots and source. He knew about it. And he knew it was a new thing. It was a new spiritual service, He validated that. But he said, it's like the grape harvest. The Torah is saying, It's like the grape harvest. Have you ever held up a grape, a peeled grape, and held it up to the light? What do you see? Or even not a peeled grape, I think even a regular grape. I haven't tried this too many times. Can anybody share what you would see if you would hold up a grape to the light? Don't try it. You can try this at home. What?
Seeds?
You would see the seed, because a grape is translucent. It could be when it's peeled, but the grape is translucent to its seed. I guess I should have tried this out, listening to talk about this. In that small detail, Moshe is giving them the secret of how to stay motivated amidst this new world, this new challenge of being immersed in the mundane, of the obscurity, yet still connecting to spiritual oneness to God. Most of the world, Israel, most of the world is translucent. It's not opaque. There are things that God says is opaque. It's not meant for us to deal with directly. By not dealing with it or not utilizing in that in certain ways, you're actually transforming it. Back to the shared screen. And that is called Klipas Noga. Klipas Noga is the source, is the veil of most of creation. We call kosher pleasures, kosher activity. That it actually is, it's a veil, it's not godliness, but you can see the spark, you can easily extract the spark. An example, kosher food, kosher meat that was slaughtered appropriately according to the Torah law, humanely, and it was salted, the blood was taken out, and so on. It comes in your plate, a nice kosher hamburger. Is that holy or is it unholy? It's klipas noga. That energy, like many things, like most things, most materials to build a house, to make a living out of, to eat, to exercise, all these things, their source is called klipas noga. It's a veil, but it's a translucent veil. And by you having kavana, having the focus that you're going to utilize this created being, the hamburger in this case, for godly purpose. Example, that would be eating to be healthy so you can have a productive life of mitzvahs. If you're focused on eating, that's your intent of eating it. If you're focused on that you have extracted. You saw that it was translucent. You saw the seed. You saw the spark. You extracted it and you connected it to holiness. You made it a vehicle to God, and now it's in the realm of holiness. If you chose, for a lapse, you just smacked your lips in and just enjoyed it for its own sake. Temporarily, you made it a vehicle for klipa, a veil of obscurity of God's presence. It's not being repurposed at this point anyways for divine connection. And that's why most things, it's up to the human being to decide, how is this thing going to go? It's neutral. But it's only neutral before you interact. After you interact with it, it's going to go either to be a vehicle for holiness or a vehicle for unholiness, meaning an obscurity of God. Now, it speaks about, in chapter 7, this is a very important concept why Judaism does not shun the physical. Because if it shunned the physical, many religions shun the physical. We don't. We say all the physical creations are actually meant for us to utilize and to repurpose their energy for becoming a vehicle for healthy, spiritual, and connected lifestyle. What happens if you don't? So temporarily, eat the hamburger, let's say you had a bad day, or just, you're not bad, you were non-focused. You, temporarily, that thing was, it's unholy. Until you eventually get your act together, you do teshuva, and you refocus yourself, and then all the energy that kept you going till then also goes. It also goes, becomes elevated. It's when you have that turnaround. It says many great sages in the Talmud, they said they couldn't teach deep ideas in Talmud until they ate wine and meat. They're admitting it. They may say, why didn't you teach it to me yesterday? Because I didn't have wine today or meat. Because the wine and meat for them, for those people, actually helped them physically expand their mind and be able to teach Torah. But the forbidden stuff, forbidden food, not kosher food as an example, that is not meant, because God's will dictated this is not meant to be utilized for energizing the person. It's only really there to give you free choice, I would say, to stay away from it, and maybe as a backdrop to kosher food, to have a choice, because everything comes a lot of times to free choice. If you would take that, let's say, ham sandwich, or not kosher food, and you would then teach Torah with it, because the energy in that food is not meant to be coming in contact with the person, in digesting the person, to give him energy, because it was not God's will. You can't say you're doing God's will. I'm doing it to learn Torah for God. You're going right now against God's will, so you can't say this activity is meant for God's will. And it's not just a subjective thing, it's an objective thing. This thing is just not meant for you to deal with. Certain things are good opportunities, some are not. This is not an opportunity meant for you to deal with. And then even if you would use it, it would not elevate it. Even though you got more energy to do something, but you can't say that you took the energy of that stuff, that food, of which a human being always is coming into contact with a lot of stuff. Your job is to elevate the stuff to reach its zenith of its purpose. You're not taking this for the zenith of its purpose. It's just not meant to do this. And therefore, the energy it gives the person, you cause a greater what? That's in the micro. You cause in the macro even a small bit of obscuring God's will and presence by that action. What do you do? Well, if a person sinned, like everybody does, we all did activity at some point in life that did that. So the answer is, we know in Judaism there's a big mitzvah called Teshuva Repentance, but it really means return. Because when you return and you refocus your life to be a life of being a vehicle for God's will and presence, the mitzvah, your soul's purpose, you're actually returning it to its source. And when you do teshuva, the problem is, what do you do teshuva? That works. Okay, the stuff that was neutral, that was temporarily, utilized for selfishness, but it was kosher. Okay, now it's being, it's the Hebrew word for permissible is called mutar. Mutar, and the Hebrew word for forbidden is called asur. Mutar is just hold on 1 second. I have to get the plug before this dies out. We have 2 minutes left. 1 minute. Okay, so Deb G, I'll answer your question in a moment. It says when all the negativity of the world will be the veil will come off. And everything will, I think it says, a certain food become kosher. The comes, even activity that was forbidden will become, and will go away, and only the good will remain. For an example, tremendous regret of a sin, and that part of their life was a veil. It hid their godly connection, and it pushed them away because they feel they became, a person, for example, by a subway, a guy saying back to the wall, hey, you can come closer, you can come by the, you know what I mean? Is that better? Deb? Can you hear me better? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, I guess it's the a little mic adjustment. What was I saying? A person by a subway, right? He's back by the wall. Why am I back by the wall? Well, the reason I'm back by the wall is because I was back by the wall because one time I came so close, my hat almost got hit or knocked off by the subway. I'm like, okay, that was a wake-up call. I'm taking 10 steps back. So a person that, like all of us, we have a lapse and we sin and we do something that's temporarily that is a veil on God's connecting to God and to that harmony. And that once we realize that and we say, you know what, that's going to be a turning point that we're going to be really powered up of connecting to God. And we're going to really try hard, much harder than had we not fallen to stay in that relationship. So then the sin actually became like, after this incredible refocusing of Teshuva, a whole new connection to God that wouldn't have existed without it. But we don't rely on that. You don't do sins. So you say, okay, I'm gonna, I'll hit rock bottom and I'll come back better than ever. You're not supposed to do that. So I would say the takeaway of chapters 7 and 8 is that it's not just a subjective experience. If you're going to give into your animal soul or you're going to give into your divine soul, is that the world is created. The world is man's stage, a human being's stage. And everything you come into contact with has different opportunities of utilizing it. It could be forbidden activity. It could be permissible activity. And everything you come into contact with is going to be one of those two things. Your job is, in the Torah, is really the divine manual. That's exactly, it's a divine manual for spiritual life, saying how should you interact with this stuff. When I say the Torah, I mean the Torah, and of course the oral Torah, the Talmud, and the practical, the practical laws, the halacha, that is meant to be that you actually do this stuff. It can't just be nice, quotes and poetry and stories and just theoretical Judaism. It's actually meant to be part of this world of our physical day-to-day lives. So all that Torah, which is divine will, is about you deciding how you're going to elevate the things you come into contact with. If it's forbidden by the Torah, you stay away and you elevate it by staying away. If it is, first, in a very crass example, person steals and they're going to go build a synagogue with stolen money. Sorry, it doesn't work. It's not divine will. That's a very extreme example. Unkosher food is a lot more harmless than that. But in that realm, it's not meant to be. Tanya is hard work. It's telling Torah is like anything. It's a spiritual discipline. But I'm giving you at least the reasoning behind it. Everything else in the world, the vast majority of things in the world, food, vegetative, interactions with people. I'd say, actually, Tanya points out, all inanimate matter, all inanimate matter is permissible, unless the person, like deems it, makes it an idol. But meaning naturally, all inanimate matter is permissible. So that is Klipas Noga. And our job is to have mindfulness, the original mindfulness. But mindfulness is not just to sort of feel good and feel in the moment, but to say, how can this thing be utilized to give me health, energy, so I can either directly, it can be a divine purpose, like using a shofar, or a ram's horn, or a esrog. That'd be taking something and directly using it, or even kosher food or kosher activity or exercise, using it so you can be a vehicle. You could be a temple, in the exercise speak, a temple of goodness and holiness, a temple of divine bittul, of a vehicle where the divine will flows through you. If a person doesn't, then they have to do teshuva, even for a nice kosher deli sandwich, for just self-satisfaction. You have to do teshuva, which means it's easier than doing teshuva for a forbidden sin. It means a refocus and you saying, I'm going to make my life a vehicle. And then all the stuff you utilize, all the deli sandwiches you had before, also become a vehicle for, they become elevated at that point as well. Deb had a question. Oh, you have problems hearing me now? Oh, no, they were good. If a non-Jew enjoys a pork meal in order to then do good deeds, is that related to Klipas Noga? Yes, I would say that is I would think so. It's a very interesting question, where do non-Jews fall in the Tanya? Because in Judaism, we believe very much so in the concept of Chasidi Umas Olam, that people that are not Jewish have a place in the world to come if they live by a moral life. They're not obligated to do mitzvahs like us and the Jewish people. They don't have that type of spiritual expectation in that level of detailed, all-encompassingness. But they do have mitzvahs. They have 7 Noahide laws. So there is a concept, and I say yes, that would be exercising of the Klipas Noga.
Question.
Yes.
I might be a little bit unrelated, but I am wondering about how it's explained that putting pesticides on fruits and vegetables and so on is still kosher.
You're saying because it's harmful?
Well, it's a chemical that's not food, and it's.
You're asking because it's like it's not moral, because it's environmentally not friendly, or because it's just not healthy?
Well, it wasn't a chemical that was around in ancient times, and it's kind of decorating the vegetables in a way, by putting I guess a harmful chemical on them. Is there any explanation about how that's permissible, for example?
So there's 2 points of the question here, and we really have to wrap up in 2 minutes. This will be the final question. Unless someone else has a really juicy one, you can always email me. So there's 2 parts to this question. One is that it wasn't around back then. It wasn't around back then. The chemical, maybe the mixture of it as a chemical wasn't, but the raw ingredients of which it comes from, I believe, were around then. I mean, at least the potential for them. I'm not a chemist, so I can't really back up. But I imagine anything we have today, at some level, the ingredients, albeit not utilized and extracted, were there. But even if not so, the Torah is very clear. It's not like the Torah says that kosher food is not about healthy or not healthy, just for the record. It's because this is divine energy, and this is meant for you to eat, and it's not meant for you to eat. It's not about health. it's not necessarily about healthy or not healthy. It actually is one of the mitzvahs that really is called a decree, that it's a super rational command. It's not a physical reason why kosher food is dictated to us.
How would something be kosher if it's got a carcinogen on coating on it?
I'm sorry?
If something is cancer causing and it's
So then it's a point. Kosher is a very general term. If something is dangerous, and it's truly dangerous, it's forbidden for another reason, not because of kosher, but for another verse called the sin called Baal Teshakhtsu. Baal Teshakhtsu means don't do disgusting things to your body. Don't harm your health. So it's more in the category of their science would be the one to say, is this something that's harmful to your body or not? And that's why it wouldn't be allowed. I mean, so the activity, it's not that it's a not kosher food, is that it's in the category of harmful to body, which is another one of the 613 mitzvahs.
Well, I guess essentially, if you're putting a synthetic chemical on something, that synthetic chemical is perhaps not kosher because you've added something to the plant.
Things that are synthetic can be kosher. That's not necessarily, it doesn't make it, I mean, synthetic in of itself is not a reason to make it not kosher.
All right.
You can have, eating rubber. I don't know. It's a little more natural. It's not allowed because it's not healthy to a human being. You're not transgressing the sin of not kosher food.
Okay.
So, but that example, if something is not healthy, can a person do something not healthy and still be a vehicle to God? Not really, because God wants you to be healthy. So again, I know it's probably a lot of opinions about that. I don't know all the data about how clear cut, but the point is that activity, will this help you further your divine connectivity or not? So some acts just simply won't. Drugs. Can drugs further a person's divine activity, being connected to divine? I don't think so. It's not a sin though in the Torah, other than if it's harmful to your body. But generally speaking, it'd probably be, at the very least, even if it's not forbidden, it's definitely exercising of the animal soul, of feeling of self, or trying to feel yourself more, which is also, albeit in a shade of gray, it's unholy, it's other, it's not about being a vehicle. A lot to digest here, and we'll end there. Thank you all for coming. Next week, we're going to do chapter 9. If you want to read ahead, that is in the Practical Tanya, page 112. If you have lessons in Tanya, it's chapter 9. Any Tanya, it's chapter 9. Have a wonderful week. And maybe, let's take an activity. Maybe, before you, this week, try to see how, when you eat something kosher, try to be mindful before. Are you going to eat this to be healthy, to do good with that? Or are you not thinking? See how many times you can eat a kosher meal or a kosher food. See if you can be mindful about that, about the energy, about how it should give you the strength to do a mitzvah, to do a good life, or you lapse, like many times we lapse. So homework for the week.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.